Most recently I was away in Joint Forces Command Northwood, which is the tri-service joint headquarters for the armed forces. When I was there I was working in a place called Joint Warfare, a very splendid title, it sounds very war-y. I was actually working on training, so the high-level, national level training of, in effect, starred generals, admirals and their headquarters down. An interesting job, challenging, very usefully for my current role. What it gave me was a very big insight into how the three services work together at a higher level, which is something we're not exposed to very much here in Gibraltar. So very good preparation for my current role in that respect.
And difficult to get back into life on the rock?
Getting back into the regiment for me was relatively easy. I came in as a second in command about a year ago. The challenges we faced as a regiment, the tasks we were doing had moved on a little bit, thankfully for the better. One of the things that was perhaps not where it should have been when I left in 2014 was things like our terms of service, which had always been slightly confused because we work for Joint Forces Command, but we are Army, we wear green. So things like terms of service were slightly caught between the two. Those have now been sorted out through a lot of hard work from our headquarters here in the naval base, etc. So to a small degree, it was easier slotting back into the regiment than it was to leave it 3 years ago.
So you say different tasks. Does that mean that you're looking for another kind of soldier? I don't want to be rude, but perhaps more brain than brawn?
Well, more brain, less brawn has really been a sort of slogan, if you want, of the armed forces for decades. It really has. There's a bit of a misperception outside of the wire as to what we do, and I do understand that, and it's understandable in the sense that people don't often have contact with the armed forces, but there's still a perception that we are, perhaps not very intellectual, and we're just about moving heavy loads at far distance and then inflicting violence on people. Ultimately, our ends remain the same, but in order to do that, we have obviously had to move with the times. Just as 20 years ago we were on Windows 95, now we're on Windows 10 version of soldiers. So you still need to be able to carry heavy loads. The ultimate end of our job is a nasty one, and that hasn't changed throughout decades. But to get there, you're right, we do need a much more cerebral, much more thinking soldier. So throughout a soldier's career now, whereas before you would have to do a very small amount of education just to ensure you could do basic operations mathematics, for example. Nowadays we demand a certain intellectual rigour, and we train our soldiers up to that standard throughout their careers. The finished product, if you look at any one of our soldiers that leaves after a full career, they have the equivalent of a degree, many of them. Certainly the equivalent of A-levels in English and maths, which are necessary if you want to progress in your career.
Well, we do live in challenging times. How prepared do you think the regiment is to meet these challenges?
We have to remain prepared. This is something we often do, and it's another misperception that when we're not visibly at war, we must hence not be up to very much. Actually, we're constantly paddling like a duck underwater to maintain that image that we're just gliding along the surface. Our challenges, I would say, split very neatly into challenges within Gibraltar, challenges outside, challenges to maintain the regiment. So in Gibraltar, our primary role, our raison d'etre, is to provide security and defence to Gibraltar and help the wider UK Armed Forces should Gibraltar be needed. That, as you know, changes constantly. The threat is always changing. We have the Gibraltar Contingency Council that's looking at that constantly, and we're represented there by Commander British Forces, and we have to adapt to that threat all the time. Outside of Gibraltar, same sort of thing. The conflicts we could look to taking part in a year's time, in 2 years' time, are not the same ones we were taking part in 15, 20 years ago, Bosnia, Kosovo. Different nature, maybe not peacekeeping, maybe not warfighting, we don't know. So just like the whole wider army, we have to be prepared, really ready for anything, ready for any kind of conflict which we may be called into. And finally, in terms of challenges, I think in terms of maintaining the regiment, my ongoing challenge, just as all my predecessors, is really recruiting a infantry battalion, plus all the trades I mentioned, from what is ultimately a small town in terms of population. This would be unheard of. In the UK, an infantry battalion would have a pool of hundreds of thousands of population, if not millions, from which to draw its potential recruits. So we need to constantly keep working really, really hard at convincing young Gibraltarians that the regiment is a career of first choice.